Good evening, world, and welcome to another episode of For the Good of All with Lorenzo Chambers. I am your host, Lorenzo Alexander Chambers. I think I'm going to start using my middle name a little bit more often. My father would like that. In school, high school and college, and after those who knew me in high school and college, they called me LA for Lorenzo Alexander. So I just want to, keep the intimacy going between us in terms of the conversations, going back and forth. Before I begin the usual promotions, like and subscribe on my social media platforms. And when my podcast launches, I hope to see all of you there in a more conversational basis. But YouTube, you can find me at Lorenzo Chambers Podcast. Instagram, it's Lorenzo for the Good. The word for, F-O-R, is replaced by the number 4. So it's Lorenzo, the number 4, the Good. And TikTok at Lorenzo for the Good, the same as Instagram, Lorenzo, the number 4, the Good. And hopefully launching mid-June, hopefully no later than July, will be my website, which is lcforthegoodofall.com. The letters LC for Lorenzo Chambers, the number 4, thegoodofall.com. So that's where you can find me. Tonight's episode has 4 parts. The first part is entitled A Portal to Remember Who We Are. The second part is titled Finding Comfort in Uncomfortable Places. Those are the 2 pieces that I want to talk to you about today from my book, For the Good of All and to the Harm of None, which is available on Amazon. So I want to talk about those things, and I'm going to end with just some social commentary on the quarterback of the New York Giants, Jaxson Dart, and his youthful indiscretions, let's call them that. And then I want to talk a little bit about the Kevin Hart roast, all from the perspective of For the Good of All. Beginning with a chapter from the book entitled A Portal to Remember Who We Are. Tuesday, January 11th, 2001, obviously day of infamy, 9/11, Twin Towers incident. I was in Manhattan at the time. I was working for a brokerage firm trading stocks. I was on 54th and Lexington at the time, that fateful day. And we had some traders who were actually in the World Trade Center's towers, who were trading stocks with some of the brokers in my firm at the time. And I got to say, I was involved in real-time tragedy in that one of the brokers at my firm was in contact with a broker at the towers who said, hey, we've just been hit and, we're evacuating the towers. We couldn't believe it. And then we got news that the second tower was hit, and we all immediately evacuated. It was so surreal. There was a silent pause, no movement, no sounds. And then as quickly as there was no movement and no sounds, we all started to move towards the elevators and the exits. And I don't remember how I got down to the first floor, but I do remember going on the train, getting ready to get on the E train in Manhattan, headed back to Brooklyn, and to transfer to the G train to get to Brooklyn, where I lived in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And the train, I don't know if it got to even one stop, but in the middle of the tunnel, it stopped, and the conductor announced that the next stop was going to be the last stop, and everyone was to get off. And that's what happened. I remember walking down the street aimlessly, not really understanding what had happened, and I passed a television shop, an electronics store, and the TVs in the window had the other attacks, the one Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, and also in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And the first thought was, wow, we're at war. And I proceeded to walk towards the Williamsburg Bridge, which connects Manhattan to Brooklyn, one of the bridges. And I remember the people coming up from downtown Manhattan because the island was shut off. The only way to get off the island was to walk across the bridges. Cars, tunnels, all that was blocked. And it was just a crowd of people coming through the dust of the World Trade Center. I actually saw the towers fall, and it was, it's one of those moments that you'll never forget, and you relive over and over again. And all of us walked across the Williamsburg Bridge in absolute silence. The people coming from downtown were covered head to toe in soot. You couldn't tell what people were, black, white, whatever. We were people. And getting to the Brooklyn side, phenomenon happened. The Hasidic Jewish community in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, is notorious for isolation, segregation. I don't think I've ever had any real interaction with them. But on this day, I do recall several members of that community greeting fellow human beings coming across the bridge with water and whatever we kind of needed. We were all people at that moment. I remember a Latino man offering his private vehicle to drive people wherever they needed to go. I piled into his car it's a 4-seater, right? 4 doors, typically 2 people in the front, maybe 2 people in the back. On this day, there were a minimum of 8 of us packed in. He dropped all of us home. I went home, called my girlfriend, and then I drove to her house. She lived in Brooklyn as well. And we watched the news that day in absolute horror and shock. The next day, we went to Coney Island Beach in Brooklyn. Another picture-perfect day, as was 9/11, not a cloud in the sky. But on the next day, there were no planes flying. And that was very interesting. And the sky was just dead silent. And I thought, and I imagined what the world was like not pre-9/11, but pre-airplanes, because that's what it was like for us at the time. If there's one thing that the 9/11 incident taught me, it was that in times of desperation, for some reason, human beings find the goodness in one another, and everything else falls away. All the social constructs, I don't even know the word that I'm looking for. I'm gonna say the artificial barriers and boundaries that separate us went away. It was just us as human beings. In the days, weeks, and even several months following 9/11, Americans were depicted as just being American, by helping one another. Race did not seem to be the important factor in determining how we treated one another. Unfortunately, an entire year had not passed before we fell back into our old ways of determining the sharing of resources by race, with the dominant race being white. 21 years later, at the writing of this book, I was haunted and perplexed by the phenomenon of 9/11 from the perspective that is arguably one of the greatest times in human history in terms of tragic death. Why were we able to come together so readily, so easily, and set aside the pretense of false barriers about humanity as characterized by race? At the same time, how did we so easily forget and so soon that what is really important is how we treat one another in our time of need? It also made me think of the idea of why do we not treat each other well when there is no tragedy and there is no need? What are the reasons that prevent us from caring about our fellow human beings on a daily basis? In times of abundance or peaceful times, why do we revert back to such tragic ways of treating one another? A primary reason that comes to mind is the fact that our country was founded on the myth that one race, the white race, is superior to all other races, and therefore the other races of black and brown people are inferior. We have been sold the myth of the social construct of race, and that there must be one race that is better than the other races. Like most lies, the way to perpetuate a lie is to keep people from speaking to one another or living separately or dealing with one another, which means segregation. Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together, explores the cost of racism for all people, black and brown and white people alike, and the idea of segregating us has been one of the strategies that continues to stymie America's overall success as a nation. I want to encourage you all to read Heather McGhee's book entitled The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. She writes, for all of the ways that segregation is aimed at limiting the choice of people of color, it is white people who are ultimately isolated. In a survey taken during the uprising in Ferguson, Missouri, after the police killing of Michael Brown, an unarmed black teenager, the majority of white Americans said they regularly came in contact with only a few African Americans. And a 2019 poll reported that 21% seldom or never interact with any people of color at all. In 2016, 3/4 of white people reported that their social network was entirely white. She goes on to say that people seem to know that the more you interact with people who are different from you, the more commonalities you'll see, and the less like they seem like the other. Research repeatedly bears this out. For example, a meta-analysis that examined 515 studies conducted in 38 countries from the 1940s through 2000, which encompasses responses from 250,000 people, showed that approximately 94% of the cases in our analysis show a relationship such that greater contact is associated with lower prejudice. This isn't rocket science, people. What's more is that contact reduces our anxiety in relation to other groups and enhances our ability to empathize with other groups. 9/11 was a microcosm of this idea. The event compelled people from different tribes to interact and to focus on what we have in common. In doing so, we understood that what we have in common is more important than our differences. The paradox becomes, why is it that after having shared that experience of 9/11 and understanding that the greater good in all of us is better for all of us, why do we still revert to our pigeonholes of race? It has to stop. I want to kind of think about that, and I want all of us to think about it. What does it mean? What does it mean to us on a daily basis, and how do we decide to react to that understanding? The second part that I wanted to talk about is more a personal anecdote, if you will, of this idea of interacting with people. And I call this finding comfort in uncomfortable places. And basically, this goes back to when I was in high school in the 1970s. Let me see if I have the years. 1978. So I was a sophomore in high school. I was 13 years old, about to turn 14. I was playing varsity football in Delafield, Wisconsin, 1978. First game of the season, late August. It was a night game, a Friday night game. We won the game. After the game, fans come up, they want autographs, whatever. And a young white girl, she couldn't have been more than 7. She asked me for my autograph, which of course I obliged. It was my pleasure, my honor, respect. And she felt comfortable enough to ask, could she touch my skin? And it just dawned on me. I mean, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I mean, we come across all types of people in New York, but in Wisconsin, 1978, small town outside of Milwaukee, that was a real thing. And it just it hit me like a ton of bricks that in 1978, a 7-8-year-old white girl had not come in contact with black people. My response was like, sure, go ahead. I held out my arm, partly because I was fascinated by what her response would be. And she touched it. She touched me, my skin, and she looked at her skin, and I could see an aha moment in her mind was that, we're the same. And I think more of that needs to happen. I think race is a social construct. I think there are enough resources for all of us to share. All of these are common threads in the idea of making decisions and acting in a way that's for the good of all. So let's keep with that theme. Lastly, I want to talk about two things. One is the Kevin Hart roast. If you did not see it, you didn't miss anything. I'm not going to tell you to see it. You might want to see it for yourself. But basically, I'm not a roast guy because I guess if it stays within a certain boundaries and parameters, I think roasts can be doable. But for the most part, I find that people use it as an excuse to say mean things. Like, I don't understand what purpose some of that serves because it sure wasn't funny. So, for example, there was a guy, Shane Gillis, I think. If I'm wrong, just, I'm okay, as I said, with the fact checking. White male comedian. He said a joke about Kevin Hart, basically around the idea that if Kevin Hart was back in the days of slavery, he would have been lynched on a bonsai tree. That's not funny. I mean, it's shocking, right? And it was in my mind, I'm like, well, how could you say that? Like, there's nothing funny about that. And then he said that he, got the okay from Kevin before, and it really wasn't about the lynching part. It was more about the fact that Kevin's so short that he could, be hung from a bonsai tree. And I have to categorically denounce that. There's nothing funny about that. When ideas that hurt people are normalized, that's a problem. And there were a lot of other jokes, along the same lines, racial jokes. There was another comedian a white male comedian who talked about a black female comedian's husband dying. I don't know if it was suicide or he jumped off the bridge or I fell off the bridge. But I don't find those things funny. And I think when America finds those things funny, it's going to perpetuate itself and find its way into our daily lives, which it does, right? Like there's no empathy. People are laughing when they should be crying, and so I'm not about canceling people, but I am about holding people accountable. And Kevin Hart, you have to be held accountable. That was wrong. You shouldn't let that happen. It happened. I think you owe people an apology. I think you need to reflect, and that can't happen again. But I know for me personally, because I don't find the good of what was the good of all in that, right? Some laughing, most people not. You all have probably already seen the feedback to that, and Kevin, I can't support you. I think you need to. Not that you need to. I think you should reflect, reconsider, and make some changes. I don't think anybody should be canceled if they are able to reflect and pivot and make some different decisions. So I hope that happens at some point. Hit me up on the social media. Let me know what you guys think about that, and we can have a conversation. Again, I talked about within the parameters of the 4 A's protocol: agree, aspire, argue, assume, to come to some type of common understanding for the good of all. I would like to hear back from you all. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think it's Jaxson Dart, quarterback, New York Giants. I'm a Brooklyn guy. I'm not a Giant fan because after I graduated from college, I played football in college. I signed a free agent contract with the New York Giants and I got cut. So I still feel away. But, I had high aspirations for him. Last year, you see him in the end zone, doing, dances that are culturally associated with African Americans, and that's cool. Nobody has a problem with that. Actually, I think we all love that. It's a way to kind of connect. But again, as you all probably know, he, introduced President Trump at a rally in Long Island, I believe, in New York, and it was just shocking. Out of touch, tone deaf. Like, what was that about, Jax? Like, so people talked about, he went to school in Mississippi, and that's how Mississippi is. I mean, I don't think that any state needs to be maligned in that way. I don't, I think the stereotype of Mississippi is everybody in Mississippi, all the white people in Mississippi are racist. No one believes that. But it's telling, like, how could you, Jax, introduce Trump under the scrutiny that's happening, the political climate of the country, and still think that you could be a leader of men in a game that's dominated by men of color? And so, being a New Yorker, one of the things that came to my mind was a headline, and it was something along the lines of Jax jinxes Jets, right? And it's a play on, the J sound. Jax jinxes Jets. I can't see them winning. I think one of the owners of the Giants was found in the Epstein files as well. His name appears. And so it seems like there's some type of underlying connections. And then we wonder why possibly the Giants aren't winning as they have been previously. And I can't see them winning this year. I think that it's going to be a very tough year for them. But again, Jax, you're in a position of leadership, a position of influence, and I would ask you to be reflective and make some decisions on what you would do differently so that doesn't happen again. And hopefully the Giants or the Gents are not jinxed, but barring some deep thought and apologies, authentic behavior changes, I don't see anything different happening. So, and all of us, including myself, that's kind of like a daily self-check, right? What could I have done differently? How can I make some decisions that are, for the most people, that it could be, right? So again, all of you, world, thank you for listening, and I hope that the universe continues to conspire on your behalf. And I ask you to consider the question and act upon it. What will be your verse in the poem of life? Good night.